Welcome to Shifting Perspectives.
Biblical conversations about topics that matter. Let's get to it. Hey, everybody, welcome back. And we have been in this exciting conversation. I mean, at least it's exciting for me because I love talking about the Bible. I love proving why it's so important to me, why I've based my life on it.
And that's the thing is, if you're going to believe the book, you have to either believe it or not to believe it. That's the core litmus test, because you either do or you don't. And over the last few sessions, we've really went into some of the reasons as to why we do believe it. And we got a couple theories for you tonight, and some a lot of facts to throw behind them to further deepen and build on what we talked about in the last couple of weeks. So you've got one that you're going to lead with that I think is a very interesting set of facts to put in your hat as you consider whether or not you truly believe the Holy Scriptures.
So one of the things when we talk about tests, I like that you used litmus tests, because there is a level of what are we going to put out there as a test to validate this. And you've heard us talk about the consistency and the congruency across 66 books, 40 authors, 1,500 years. We've got manuscript evidence, we have archaeological evidence, but we have these other litmus tests, if you will. One of them we call the honesty test. And here's essentially how the honesty test works. The honesty test says that if you're going to make something up, you're generally not going to make something up that puts you in a bad light. So if I'm going to lie to make myself look good, right?
Most people do.
Why not? If I'm telling the story, I want to tell the story that makes me look good.
Sure.
And we have references in the Bible throughout that don't paint the authors or the people that are in the narrative in very good light.
Yeah.
So as an example of that, Jesus called Peter Satan. He said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Because Peter said something that was outside of character of the will of God and what the expectation would be of a disciple. And that's, if I was going to write about myself, I would call myself Satan.
You'd forget about that. You'd forget about that part.
That's right. We'll leave that one out and go on, or James and John, their nickname was the Sons of Thunder. They were kind of like bulls in a china closet, and I can't imagine running up against them in a dark alley. That's probably where they got that reputation from before Jesus.
Yes.
And isn't that what's incredible as you start talking about guys' lives, is the transformation of some of these different characters? You got a tax collector who basically was a thief. You got fishermen who were basically brawlers. That's James and John got that Sons of Thunder nickname. And you've got all of these varying personality types, but yet none of them are really painted in a great light. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, and it's all written about. Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark, in the narrative of Mark, in the Garden of Gethsemane, there's a young man who's described as running away from the scene naked. I'm not going to write that about myself. And that was Mark. Mark was writing about himself in the Gospel narrative that he fled from the Garden of Gethsemane when the soldiers came to take Jesus away.
Yeah.
So the honesty test basically says if you're going to lie and tell a story, you're going to do so in a fashion that isn't going to make yourself look bad in the process. So Scripture is pretty clear on the fact that, God is not a respecter of persons, and He takes what is broken and damaged and turns it into something new. And that's all part of the story, right? You have a journey.
Absolutely. Everybody's got a journey.
Yeah, I've got a journey, and you who are watching this video, you've got a journey too, and it doesn't have to be the Sons of Thunder and you wanting to call down fire on the guy that made you upset or the road rage that you had, but God changes us, and it's okay for us to have that story.
Yes.
Right? It's not, I grew up in a Christian home, so I never did anything wrong, and everything was perfect.
I don't think anybody's got that story.
I like to think that I do. No, we all have this journey, and the truthfulness of Scripture in the raw of people lends itself to the authenticity of the scripture. And so that's one piece of the honesty test that we look at. The second is, if you're talking about a lie, generally speaking, I know for myself included, if I'm going to tell a lie, I'm probably not going to be willing to die over it. The scriptures, and from the time that the scriptures were what we call canonized, basically put together, because it's 66 individual books, right? It's a compilation of books. When those were put together from that time to now, over 2,000 years, people have been willing to say, I believe this so much, I believe Jesus so much that I'm willing to die. They've literally been beaten, they've been martyred, they've stood outside and watched their homes be burned down, they've watched their churches be burned down, they've watched their families be killed. And generally speaking, from the honesty test standpoint, you're not going to do that over something that isn't true.
Yeah.
And so that's the realities of the honesty test that we put into play.
And as you talk about that and you think about those patron saints and all those that lived at the time of Christ, and one of the things that they did was they had the advantage. They walked and they talked with Christ.
Right.
They got to see the miracles. The book of John, the very last verses. If we wrote down all the miracles that Christ did, we would the volumes of the books of the world wouldn't contain them.
Exactly.
I mean, we get such a small sliver, and that was his love. That was his gift to us. Was that love, that everlasting love for salvation? And one of those things is that love. Just he asked for our heart. And it's something that it is a lifelong sacrifice, as Paul wrote. A living sacrifice. I sacrifice myself daily to the work. And that leads one of the other things that we talk about is the gap test, the gap theory.
Right.
Where it says the farther away you move from an event, the less credibility the event had. And so whenever you think about the life and times of Christ, at the time of the crucifixion, and we're approaching Easter, the crucifixion, the resurrection of Christ. One of the things after Christ's resurrection, he didn't just disappear.
Right.
They didn't put him in a grave and disappear. And if that would have been the case, then it would have been like, okay, well, somebody stole this, but no, he walked, he talked, he met, he was on this earth for another 40 days, and people literally saw him ascend to heaven. So the farther away you move from something says that I can now create more doubt.
Right.
I can tell you anything I want to about what I did whenever I was 13 years old, because you didn't know me when I was 13 years old.
Right.
Now, the people that knew me when I was 13 years old, I can't lie to them very much. So the farther away that you move from something, the more doubt that you can create. And that's what people have tried to do with the Bible. Say, well, it was written so long ago, and this book was written after it already happened. And they love to say that about Daniel, by the way. It's so precise. But then you realize that they say, well, it was written 300 years after Daniel. But yet we have copies of Daniel in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Bible, that came into be written 100 years after Daniel. So their theory falls apart, which happened before the events that Daniel was talking about. So they proved themselves wrong in that. So you take example the other writings of the time. You've got our New Testament scripture, which we have roughly 5,800 copies of the manuscripts and the texts. Those were all proven real. Versus the other writings of the time, which we have no problem with Homer's Iliad saying, we got roughly 2,000 copies of that, and we don't have any problem saying that that's real. Homer wrote that; it's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
But we do question the Bible when we've got almost 3 times the volume of just the New Testament, not counting the tens of thousands of copies that the Old Testament.
Well, and of just the Greek.
Yes, just the Greek.
Let's not forget that there are multiple languages that the New Testament has been written in that are in that same category.
Yeah. So as we look at those things, and it's like now that we're down the road a ways, we start questioning what really happened. Whenever the ancient writings, those that happened at the time, they are so real, so accurate. They were written by eyewitness accounts. And there's no way that this 66 book is as cohesive as it is if it's not true. And it's not God's inspired word.
Right.
you take Plato's writings. We got 7 original copies.
Right.
7 original copies, but yet we have no problem ascribing them to Plato.
And the distance between them.
Yes.
From Plato's original to when those copies that those 7 copies that we have, that's that whole gap. It's like 1,200 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our New Testament is not 1,200 years. It's not 1,000 years. It's not 500 years.
Exactly.
You know, these books are within. So, like you take the Book of Revelation, if you look at John and you can date that somewhere around say 80, 90, you're within 50 years of Jesus's resurrection and his ascension that book was written.
So, you know, the bottom line is this, is the world tries to dispute and to negate the scripture because that is the foundational cornerstone of what we have. That's God's holy word. And we either negate it or we try to change it. We try to change it to say what we want it to say. We go away from the original manuscripts and we try to make it say what we want to say. And the bottom line is, you know, going back to what we started about was the litmus test. Is it positive or is it negative? Is it true or is it not true? You know, for me, I've studied it. We talked last session about, you know, different people that had studied it and tried to prove it wrong and ultimately led them on their path to find Christ and find the Bible is true.
Yeah.
We talk about in Sunday school and on our messages and Wednesday night services, you know, as we delve into this, we delve into them, you know, way deep and you find those threads that say, there's no way this is not a cohesive writing. That's why I have no problem with accepting the Bible as it's written, as God's holy inspired word.
Yeah, me too. And so those are some of the common things. And so if we just run back over the last few weeks and recap kind of what we've talked about, you know, why we believe this Bible. And really at the end of the day, you're going to have to start a journey of faith that takes you down a path of knowledge that puts your faith on a sure foundation to believe in this. But you've got to start at the beginning. And the beginning is get one, pick it up, open it, let God begin to speak to you through it. And as you do, you'll begin to see those threads too. And you'll begin to start recognizing God's story is amazing. And he put it together in an amazing way for this very reason, so that the answer could be given to the question, is this really trustworthy? Is this really believable?
Yes.
And I say that it is.
Absolutely. The most scrutinized book in the history of books by a magnitude of 1,000. And nobody's found the flaw yet because it doesn't exist.
That's right. And so with that, we're going to close this series that we've just done on why the Bible is trustworthy and why we believe it. And we will see you guys next week as we dive into a new topic on our next Shifting Perspectives podcast.
Thank you for watching. Be sure and share it with your friends. You never know who's out there that needs this.
That's right.